Hello again, it's Lock Noob, and today we get to look at something really, I think, quite beautiful. This is a book by Ulf Weisenberger, I hope I got my pronunciation right, called Antique Locks and Keys, A History, Uses and Mechanisms. And this was kindly sent to me for the purposes of this review by Artisan Ideas. So thank you to Artisan Ideas for sending me this book. As lock enthusiasts and collectors, there aren't that many books available to us, general interest books on locks. Sure, we've got a number of technical tomes available to us, especially if you're into your high security locks. So it's really nice to see a large book full of coloured pictures that is sort of a scale which I'll describe as a coffee table book. So you can leave around and guests can sort of thumb through and go, oh, that is interesting. This is a really sort of nice big tome. If you're interested to know how many pages, there are just over 280 pages in this book. It's got a split cover, front and back, and it sort of gives you a timeline of history, starting with the Sumerians over here on the first page and ending somewhere in the Middle Ages around 1000 AD. And if you flick to the back, you can see that it picks up from around 1000 AD and goes all the way up to 1850. And on this page, it describes the time periods at which these stylistic periods occurred. For example, Romanesque, Gothic, Renaissance, Baroque, and Neoclassical. It could be Baroque. I'm not so sure. What I'd like to do is sort of take you through some of the bits of the book that I thought were just little highlights, but I don't want to spoil too much of this. So it's a big book, and it's just full of the most gorgeous large-scale pictures, and it really is something that is highly interesting and shows how decorative not only the locks are, but the keys, the hinges, decorative plates, everything that you could think of to do with locks. There are these beautiful large-scale pictures here for you. You've got those beautiful chests there. It talks about engraving and just everything. I'm just sort of giving you a bit of a flick through before I show you some of what I consider to be my personal highlights. So one of the first highlights for me was pretty much the entire chapter on the ancient history of locks, just because I find it really, really fascinating, very interesting seeing these very early concepts around people trying to secure their property. And you can see the origins of modern locks, even in locks which go back to around 2600 BC in Mesopotamia. This lock you may have seen already on a few videos. I'm going to splice in a demonstration by Michael Maynard here, where he has a replica of one of these pin tumbler style locks with a lift and slide key. The oldest original lock specimen comes from Sargon's palace in Iraq, and that's dated to 750 BC. Another highlight in this ancient history chapter is looking at these indoor sliding bolts, where you'd have a key that comes in from the outside, a hooked piece of metal, which can drop down. Sometimes it's hinged like this, and just literally grip onto the bolt and slide it back. And why did I think that this is really interesting? Well, we still have drop keys like this that are still in use and existence even into the modern day, where there'd be a hole, you put a key like this through, the end would drop down and engage with a locking mechanism. And whilst I appreciate these sliding bolt mechanisms aren't the same as modern locks, the fact that we can see the echoes of the past in the modern is just fascinating. I mean, some of these locks are from 200 BC. One very useful addition in this book I find is these next few pages around technical terms of locks and keys with their very clear diagrams. It really helps in the understanding of the language used in the rest of the book and how locks work by providing you with very clear diagrams with good naming. So for example, in these warded keys, these cutaways are called clefts. That's good to know, for example. And it isn't just about the key terminology here. You can see different types of spring bolt locks. You can see here some of the other types of locks and their internals, warded locks and their internals. And the fact they're so clear and labelled it really does help you to understand how the locks work further on into the book. Book with so many gorgeous pictures, it's very hard to choose highlights, I have to say, but I absolutely love this page on some Gothic style doors and iron boxes. I would absolutely love to have this beautiful iron strong box. I mean, isn't that just gorgeous? Real dark and brooding, but functional in its own way. I think quite beautiful. And just look at this amazing door from an Italian castle from the 15th century. And there's even a smaller door within the door, what they call a wicket door. I just love this. It's a beautiful picture. Out of the many beautiful Gothic designs from the 1500s, one of them which I really liked was this gorgeous lock, because it has a wonderfully complicated internal mechanism, and it has an incorporated functional dragon head for releasing the bolts by moving somehow this dragon head. I haven't quite worked out by studying this picture, but study it I will do. Moving from the Gothic to the Renaissance period, you may think that my first stop in my highlights would have been another beautiful lock, but no. Actually, for me, the thing which caught my eye were these beautiful keys with these gorgeous bows with just the most almost web-like designs. And it's certainly something I think we're missing in the modern day, isn't it? The element of beauty within the functionality of locks. I think I might have found a new obsession, which is these amazing, beautifully etched lock boxes. These happen to be again from the Renaissance period, but there's just something so gorgeous about them. I imagine, however, they're not cheap, so if anybody has one they want to send me, feel free. Another double page highlight for me is these two pages here. Now, from first glance, it might be a page you go, not much colour, and flick over, but just have a look. So number one, we have a padlock over here. And you might think, why is that interesting? And the key works in a very unusual way. But again, it's that echoes of the past. This lock is from 1580, around 1580. But there are locks which come from, the 20th century, which, let's be honest, aren't too far apart, at least in terms of their form and some of their aesthetic. Again, I just find that interesting. You have locks which are many hundreds of years old, but you can still see the echoes of the past and the future, as I said before. And this lock is beautiful. Not so much the internals, which are, I would say, a little basic, not to discredit this lovely lock, but this key is monogrammed. Now, we have modern day locks made by Abus, for example, where the keyway actually spells ABUS, which I think is cool. But look at this. This is monogrammed. They think it's probably an L or an R, or an R and an L, monogrammed into the key, let's call it warding itself, and the keyway is warded in the shape of the key. It's just a beautiful piece of work. They think this was circa 1600. What's lovely as well in this book is it doesn't just include things like locks and keys. Some of these hinges, these forged and chased hinges here, are still just works of beauty. This lock from around 1600 caught my eye, partly because I saw a lock very reminiscent to this still in use, still functioning in a museum that I went to in Oxford the other day. Out of the many beautiful Renaissance locks, there was one for me which really stood out, and this is this from 1780 from Eastern Switzerland. And this has the most gorgeous and complex and beautiful warding. I mean, it's crazy. The corresponding cuts in the key here. It says in the key bit, all ward cuts and recesses are curved to follow the circumference of each element in the ward plate. This level of precision could only be achieved by a master turner. Can you imagine having to make a lock this precise in around 1780? I mean, the mind boggles. I have a more modern but still antique warded lock, which isn't a very good example, but definitely proves my point. This would have been maybe on a residence or a commercial property, but this is the ward plate in this lock. Can you see? Let me just bring that up and focus on it. there is a ward plate. What would happen is the key would come in, I'll do it from the other side, and the key would pass through that ward plate. You can just see that. Look at the slop in this and how rudimentary this mechanism is on this particular lock, and there's the key. Now look at this example. It's worlds apart, and I mean, again, what can I do to get my hands on a lock like this? As we advance onto the Baroque period or Baroque period, one of the highlights for me was, and I never thought I'd say this, is looking at these absolutely beautiful clasps and hinges. I mean, isn't that just lovely? Something I was surprised to learn when trying to look for a highlight in the neoclassical period is how I'm not really a big fan of locks from the neoclassical period. They start to look sort of more functional and more like modern day locks, where that sort of attention to detail and beauty is starting to fade from this. I hope you can see why I chose the highlights that I did. There are just some gorgeous examples, and no doubt if you get this book you'll have very much your own choice of highlights. But the book doesn't end there. There are some smaller, admittedly, lock topics left in the book, which are, again, very interesting. There's this symbolic power of the key, and keys are very symbolic, even to the modern day, where, especially in the UK, you get the symbolic key to the house when you're 21, for example. So it's really interesting hearing about some other parts of the world and cultures. But in this latter part of the book, one of the things I just found really interesting is learning about early soldering as a technique for making up keys and locks. I never knew that copper was used. Do you remember that LR or RL monogrammed key that was one of my highlights earlier? I didn't realise that to make this, it wasn't just sort of cut out of a piece of metal. The key was actually soldered in, I think, was it 4 parts? The skill and craftsmanship to do that is absolutely amazing. And when you look at the signs of damage and wear in some of these older keys, again you can see how here, look at this copper solder across this piped key here. So really was a mend and repair process, and it's just really interesting again just to see that this technique was used, because I didn't really know it was. And the final part of the book that I want to just show you, and a piece that I found very interesting because it again helped explain some of the techniques. It's also the very last part of the book is about the ornamentation. This is about how there are different types and ways to give ornamentation to locks and plates and hinges and all those kind of things. So we have punching, chasing, engraving, etching, embossing, iron cutting, and just reading through these and those techniques, I just found really interesting, because I was a little ignorant of these skills, and now I know about them. I'm better able to spot how this ornamentation was done when I see some of the locks in the book. So despite being sent something for the purposes of a review, I still like to remain objective about my opinions of it. But when it comes to something like this, I find it very hard. It's a well-curated, well-written book. But for me, it's just those pictures all the way throughout. And just exploring these locks and reading about them, where they came from, how they worked, just the history behind them, everything about it. It's just really interesting. Now, I'm not a lock historian, so I can't really comment on the content of the writing in terms of its history and accuracy. But what I can tell you is that it's just very well laid out. I really like the way it's been organised into these historical periods, and I think that even if you had a passing interest in lock mechanisms, or even history, I think you too will just be sort of beguiled by the pictures and artistry inside this book. So would I recommend this book to people? Well, if you're not into locks, lock collecting and lock history, then no, absolutely not. But if you've made it this far through this video, I would hazard that you probably are into those subjects. And if you are, then I would very much doubt that you wouldn't find the majority of this book absolutely fascinating. Even if you didn't read a word of the book, just the pictures alone speak volumes, I think. So how much does this book cost? Well, at the time of filming, this costs around $58.95, but Artisan Ideas were very nice to offer us a discount code, which will entitle you to a 20% discount code on any combination of their 4 books on locks, which are Persian locks, locks and keys throughout the ages, antique locks and keys, and the new Spruce Forge Manual of Locksmithing. I think the majority of which I have covered in previous reviews. I believe that discount code, which I'll leave in the description, will be active for a number of months, but I don't know when you're going to be watching this video, or if it will still be active when you go to look for this book. But just to let you know, at the time of publishing this video, that promo code in the description is active. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this journey through this beautiful coffee table book on antique locks and keys. I'd love to know what you think to this type of book in the comments. I do read them all, reply to as many as I can. If you like this video, please leave a like, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you'd like to see more content like this, then please do consider subscribing, because it really does help my channel out. And of course, I'll see you all next time.